Morning, Pete.
Hi Chris, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you for sort of agreeing to catch up. I think having worked with you in the past, and as I'm sort of talking to loads of people about loads of different things, and I know from our conversations you're talking to loads of people about loads of different things, I thought it'd be really interesting to have a bit of a chat because we move in quite different worlds in terms of the problems we're trying to solve for people. But I think there's probably a lot of commonality, and I keep on thinking about how many businesses are sitting sort of waiting for life to change around them, but actually have got massive opportunities to kind of get on with it and drive a bit of change. But I suppose as a starting point, because I know that I'll put this out on LinkedIn, we've got some connections in common, but a lot that aren't. So there are probably people I'm connected to, thinking particularly the sort of travel and leisure type world, who would have no idea who you are and what you do. So maybe a sort of a brief, and there's a lot in there, but a brief sort of potted history of kind of what you do and what your sort of skills and approach are, I suppose.
Sure. I think like you and I are very similar in some areas. I think if you drew it as like a Venn diagram, I don't think they're two mutually exclusive circles. I think like the people both try and do sort of look at businesses holistically. There's always a whole raft of different areas that sort of most businesses need a bit of help with or nudging in. Although my focus tends to be sort of like my bit of the diagram that's not joined is around technology, and yours is more sort of business process and finance and that
Yeah.
sort of side of it. But my background, I'm a technologist by trade, so the last 20 years designing, building, scaling platforms for people. Started my career in F1 with McLaren, and then went on to sort of design and build a number of large sort of e-commerce platforms and things for banks, and redesign the infrastructure for things like play.com when that was a thing, and was TSB ShareView. And then in 2011 got involved in a startup, which went on to become UK Cloud. So that was a cloud platform, a bit like Amazon's or Microsoft's, but for public sector sort of use only. So that's where
Yeah.
things like the self-assessment tax platform ran, and that sort of stuff. And I left that in 2019 to focus on sort of doing my own thing. Sort of over the last 10 years, got involved a lot with a number of venture capital funds and investors and high net worth. So I do a lot of advisory work, sort of advising them on tech investments and understanding the sort of the risks or opportunities associated with potential investments. But also launched a couple of tech companies myself. So an information security business called InfoSAS, maritime fueling and lubricant business called
Yeah.
Believe.
Got to have a bit of diversity.
A little bit of diversity, and also do quite a bit of management consulting, just for generally it's businesses that exist in portfolios of venture capital funds that I do the work for. So where the board might need some help or guidance, or they're sort of struggling from a technology perspective where they can't quite seem to make it work. I do quite a lot of advisory stuff there.
And have you seen, has there been a shift in the last sort of 6 months, is the kind of crucial period that everyone's looking at in terms of what people are asking you to do, or in that technology field, is it stayed pretty much the same problems?
Well, you've got the old adage of change or die, right? So I think there's a number of businesses where their market has changed that they're in. But I think with regards to sort of most of the work that I'm doing, I wouldn't actually say that it has. I think a lot of the time it's business paralysis, and sort of generally what happens is you'll get a business where they're really struggling to work out how they can move forwards from where they are. It's like we're here today and we know that we've got to sort out something. We've got to get a product to market, or we've got to, we're failing to find customers, or we're failing to be relevant, or whatever it is that they're trying to do. And within the team, they just don't know how to do it, or sort of through no fault of their own, they're concerned that they're going to do it wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's still a lot of concern out there about things like GDPR, for example. It's like, GDPR. I can't put my data in the cloud. I can't use this service. But people just it's uneducated sometimes, and so in that case, it's just a sort of case of coming in, having a look at it, understanding what they're actually trying to do, and then having a fresh pair of eyes on it, which I think is what sort of you tend to find a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting when I look at the mix of people that I'm talking to, and then the handful of people that I'm doing regular work for. A lot of the things that they're diving into now are issues and challenges that actually probably existed for 2 or 3 years. But this period has made them, the proactive ones think, right, I can't delay this anymore. I've got to get on with it. And there's a certain extent to which, I've got a lot of people in sort of travel and leisure arena where operationally there's not a lot going on for some of them, but some of them are. It's strange, isn't it? But some of them are able to effectively sort of mothball the operational side of the business, but in the background think, right, all these things that have been building up over the past few years that we kind of know we need to tackle, how do we use this time to get on with it and dive in? It's interesting what you say about things like GDPR as well, because that's one that people have sort of swept under the carpet a bit. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they're looking at sort of aggregating lots of information in the kind of leisure market to then sort of spit out a new product to people. And they've always been really concerned about the sort of GDPR implications of where they're getting data from and how they want to share it, and so ignored it and done nothing. Whereas now they've got this opportunity to go, well, actually, let's get on with it. And in a way, this period prompted them to be a bit more proactive, which is good to see.
At the same time, I think there's quite a few businesses that have actually sort of taken advantage of the situation. And I think I was explaining this to somebody the other day. They thought I was being rather prophetic with the way I was talking. That yes, the economy might be struggling, and a lot of businesses are failing, but money is largely like energy in the universe. It never goes anywhere. It just transfers from one place to another. So there's somewhere where the money is going, right? Unfortunately, a lot of it is actually flowing out of the UK to places like the US, where there's a number of large tech giants that are sort of making an absolute killing at the moment. But there are also a lot of businesses in the UK that are doing very well, where the money is flowing too. And if people leave their money, if they're worried about spending it and leave the money in their accounts, then it stays with the banks, and that puts the banks in a stronger position to lend and give mortgages and things like that. So I think some people get really sort of bogged down with the fact that the economy is struggling. It definitely is in places, but it's not everywhere. I think as one bit dips, another bit picks up, and so there's always opportunity.
Are there any sort of particular sectors, or even rather than sectors, it might even be models that you feel are then attracting the money in at the moment? If they're in this kind of global flow of money, what's the money gravitating towards?
Well, there was an obvious opportunity in PPE at the start of lockdown, funnily enough, and I think there's a company that's in one of the VC portfolios that I know, and they're a company called Charged Up, and they were doing basically there's a problem in pubs where when people go to a pub, quite often their phone's dying and they want to plug it in, but for sort of electrical safety reasons, they don't like you plugging them in right at the tables or anything like that, and then therefore they go to the bar and say, can you plug this in behind the bar for me? And actually a lot of pubs, I've never done it personally, but apparently a lot of pubs do that, and it's a real problem. So they created this sort of charging station that looks a bit like a toaster, and you can sort of securely charge your phone at the bar in a pub. And they did really well with getting contracts with a load of big pub chains across the UK, and that was going really well. And then COVID-19 hit, and they sort of saw an opportunity because their customers had another problem. The pubs were going to need to somehow adapt in this world. They're going to bring people back in, but as part of that, they needed to be able to offer like hand sanitization and things like that. So they created a sub-brand called Cleaned Up, and these sort of stations that we're seeing in every bar and restaurant and pub, as you walk into it, you can sort of pump the hand sanitizer. you'll notice it now. It's a company called Cleaned Up. So they're all white and then they've got green arrows on them and it says Cleaned Up on there. But they completely pivoted their business model and made a killing.
Yeah.
And it's not just pubs, they've got it in public transport and all over the place.
Well, I guess they already had those relationships with the right places to quickly get stuff through the door, did they?
Yeah, well, so they already had the relationship with the buyer, because the buyer was already procuring from them anyway. And they also had a supply chain capability with regards to getting things made.
Yeah.
And although at its core product was a mobile telephone charging device, if you look at what their business was capable of, which was basically taking a product design to product build to import to the UK to getting it into a certain industry, a certain sector, it gave them an opportunity.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And there's other things that have just sort of come of age. I mean, there's an app that's been on my radar for a while because a guy I sort of know a little bit actually because of ski industry connections, but he's very much has well, it's not beyond plural. I don't know what sort of multiple beyond plural would be, but very interesting career. And he's involved in an app called Pepper, which is a table service app. And I remember talking to him, a couple of years ago, and it was, pottering along nicely. And one of the big pub chains had taken it, and a few independent cafes. They were trying to. It started so that guys like Starbucks have got their own loyalty app, or Costa have, and things like that. Whereas they're thinking, well, actually, if we can make it so that a little independent coffee shop down the road can have a loyalty app, that would be really great. And that's just massively come of age because now they've been able to very quickly make the table service element of that incredibly important, link it up to the point of sale machines and things like that, and the demand has been fabulous. So I think it was something that I felt would always do well because it solved a genuine problem, but that problem became really pressing when people can't go and stand at the bar and put in an order. And another one that I'm sort of actively involved with at the moment is which I've bored most people with, probably you, I'm sure, is this Hoodjo, this bike parking app.
I've never heard of it. Tell me more.
No, I must have failed to mention it to you. But Hoodjo, everybody sort of got on their bikes to get everywhere and locked in, and then distressingly, a lot of people find the bike isn't there when they come back. So the sort of secure bike parking element has really sort of got people's focus at the moment. So we've been able to accelerate that, quite quickly. So at the moment it's sort of trialing in Southwest London, and I think it will take, unfortunately the time of year isn't great because everybody's now putting the bike firmly back in the garage or shed because it's hacking down. But that's come the spring, it'll be fine. It'll come of its own.
Was there a pivot opportunity into electric scooters with them in some shape?
Well, yeah, I mean, what we have been looking at, because at the moment, obviously, with electric scooters, it's a purely rental market, although I suspect that will change quite quickly, and there will be permissions for sort of privately owned ones. So that it can be any small vehicle parking, and then we're already making sure that we adapt it so it's very clear that if a particular host can offer charging, they can, and it's very easy to add it in the app. So you can just go, yeah, I want my bike or scooter or whatever it is charged while I'm leaving it here. And for somebody to pay £1 to have their thing charged while it's parked is going to be seen as really cheap and convenient. But actually, the person doing the charging, is going to cost them 17p to charge that thing. So they've got it's a nice little bit of margin, and that's it's an interesting one with that because it's all about micro payments, but collectively it can make people quite reasonable money.
But the interesting thing about that is that a micropayment business wasn't even a viable option 10 years ago because the payment platforms weren't there. Like, the minimum cost of a transaction was like 30p. So if your plan was to try and sell something for 15 pence and make 5 pence on it, you're going to make a loss of 10 pence every time you made a transaction. So I think things have moved along a lot in that space.
Yeah, and I think it facilitates new ideas that people wouldn't have thought of before, wouldn't it? Because if you've got sort of Stripe and you can do these micro, it's a sort of product that they offer. There's lots of great ideas that people have had where, as you say, the economics just wouldn't have worked in the past, but now it can stack up, really well and make people decent money.
Well, that's the thing. Technologies change and improve and create new opportunities, like platform opportunities. So, there's like things like Stripe came along, and you can build whole new services on top of it really quickly, which previously you couldn't have done before. You got things like Klarna, which has just gone completely bonkers over the last 10 months. So that's
Is that the retail finance?
Retail finance, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can you see them everywhere now. Like pay in 3 easy payments, 0% or something along those lines. But you get it in Halfords, you get it in Debenhams, like everywhere online. So rather than these businesses trying to, what they're trying to do is increase their basket size in e-commerce. So how much money could I get somebody to spend with me in one hit? But they don't want to have to go through the process of being like FCA regulated or anything along those lines. So they can offer credit services. And thing is that with a lot of the older sort of pay-as-you-go type services, a bit like the Littlewoods catalogue used to do. Everything had like a from £1 a week or whatever it was for the rest of your life. People actually they go out looking, but they expect 0%. They expect to be able to get it for nothing. And actually this service, a couple of larger retailers have sort of built their own 0%, or they might have a store card, credit card option or something like that. But Klarna just said, no, this is the bit that we're going to solve. We're not going to try and be a shop ourselves. We're just going to do this, and it's going to be a really great platform that people can plug into, and like everyone's just plugging into it, and it's great for people just spend more money when they think they can they've got more time to pay it off, which obviously is it's a negative from one perspective.
Yeah,
it's positive for others. So yeah,
and I think there's bound to be a lot of innovation going on in terms of retail, isn't there, at the moment, of people looking at how can they keep real or virtual footfall going through retail places. Because the whole evolution of the high street, I don't even know where to start on that, because I think it's going to be a massive sort of 15-year period that we're entering into, and how business can go about engaging with people and wanting to draw them into physical premises and then backing that up with their online offering. And some big retailers have really caught a cold in this period because they just didn't have that online offering.
No, Primark's probably the biggest obvious one, isn't it? Although they had the family money to sort of sit back and sort of suck it up, but they had no online experience. They had no online sales channel, did they?
Yeah.
They suddenly went from doing, I think it was 600 million a month to nothing. It was like it's quite a lot. But they had the financial backing to suck it up. Thing is, I've watched quite a few webinars and things a bit like this. I've been invited onto loads of things over the last 6 months, and really sort of conscious of the fact that there's a lot of the same drivel being spouted. It's like, give me an example of a business that's done really well in COVID. Zoom, brilliant. Thanks for pointing out the obvious one. Yes, online collaboration tools have done very well. Well done. But I think that I've seen, like, even in the travel industry, if you go back to the point of view, like, what does your business basically do? Don't look at necessarily the end product, but what are its capabilities? And I've seen a lot of people in that space getting into like freight and cargo.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally you're shifting something from A to B via a logistics setup. That's that's what you're doing. So yes, it's different from flying a family of 5 from Hertfordshire to the Alps, and putting them up in a villa. But you could fly a couple of pallets of nitrile gloves from Vietnam to Heathrow. Same difference. It's something that you can get into, and people, they've got the relationships with the flight chartering businesses, and they'll then go and speak to those, and the flight chartering people are going, well, actually, we've stripped all of the seats out of our plane, so we can fly cargo now instead. I'm like, brilliant. Okay, well, we'll do that. And it's those sorts of opportunities. But I think that's why I really enjoy sort of, for want of a better, I think somebody needs to come up with a better word of entrepreneur. It makes it sound like a twat. But I think it's just sort of by not working for somebody else, on a 9 to 5, I am not bound by what their business does. and how they want to go about doing business and what it is that they want to sell, which is completely fine. Every business should have those sort of controls around what it is that you're selling and who's selling it and why they're selling it. But I can explore any opportunity that comes my way, and those, you don't know from day to day what's gonna come. And if I've got a business that's doing something in, if I did have a travel business and I decided that actually now I want to, there's an opportunity to make some money by helping people freight some things around, or distribution, or need contacts or feet on the ground in certain countries to enable things to happen. I could do that. I could make that happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? That kind of, by not being in the midst of it, it does free your brain up as well, just to think about the problems differently. Because there's, when I started doing the consulting, there was an element of me thinking, how much help can I actually be to these people? And, once or twice I fell into the kind of trap of thinking, well, kind of, this is easy, why haven't they done it? And then once you start getting involved, you realize why people haven't done it. Is they just don't, it's not that they don't have the capabilities or the team or the resources, they just don't have the mental bandwidth to do everything that they need to do. And you realize that as somebody who's sitting outside and you're not bogged down by the day to day, particularly at the moment in a sort of challenging trading period, you can sort of jump into things sort of when it suits you, and you can give things your focus when it pops into your mind, and you can really tackle a gritty issue without being bogged down by the fact that Mary's phoned in sick today or something like that. It's sort of quite liberating.
Again.
Okay.
Well, no, I think and something that we've spoken about before. It's a bit like the mentorship thing. I don't subscribe to it. I haven't got any mentors apart from occasionally have a chat with you and you set me in the right direction, which is good. But I don't sort of subscribe. I don't actively seek people to mentor, and I don't think anybody really goes out necessarily looking for somebody to mentor them. But definitely when I've been involved with any business that I've been sort of helping to solve their technology or business process problem or whatever it is that they're doing, a large part of what you do is just you're just a sounding board to the CEO or the MD or the CTO, and because 99% of the time they've got no one else to talk to, nobody else that understands the problems that their business is having, or and there's that I suppose Chinese wall that you want to be honest with your staff and open about the concerns to try and motivate them to make things happen, but at the same time you don't want to worry them so much that they're either ineffective or they decide to leave. So they've got no, a lot of the conversations I have with CEOs and founders, it's just like, shit, we're out of money in 3 months or 6 months or wherever, and this client's not going to buy the product because it's not really ready or what, and you can just sit there and you can listen to it and you can sympathize, and then you can go, right, well, I'm here to help, what can we do, here's some ideas, let's start working that through. And it makes a big difference to them, not just in the fact that not just in the fact that it just helps them to actually sort the problem out, but I think it also helps their mental, sort of their mindset around, actually, I'm not in this entirely by myself, and it's not all just in my head. This is actually, somebody agrees with me that this is tough, but I've got someone's got my back, and they're going to help me do it. So I think that's probably 90% of what I end up doing, really, just having have those conversations. And
I definitely see a similar pattern in terms of what I do, but particularly for 1 or 2 people, it has developed far more into a kind of mentoring, coaching relationship than me actively shaping their sort of strategy or implementing things. And when I think back sort of 10 years ago, I did seek out a mentor, and it was somebody that I sort of actively looked for and paid for their time. And it's when I was running quite a small business, and I was in just such a small bubble that I needed somebody that I'd have, we used to do, I think we only met up once every sort of quarter for half a day, but then we'd have a sort of monthly phone call where he'd, partly remind me of the things that the successes, which actually people lose sight of because you're sort of so bogged down in stuff that sometimes you can forget that those things you said you do, you actually did, and they worked really well. And then the things that were challenging didn't work really well, but you kind of moved on and found something else to do. So I found it massively useful. I think it's over a period of about 3 years when the business was sort of growing, but I hadn't got to a point where I kind of had my own internal support team in a way. That it was really helpful to have, as you say, that sort of sounding board, somebody outside the bubble.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think there's like internally as a business owner or somebody that's in charge, you feel only as good as your latest failure, I think. And then as
I thought you were going to say success.
No, I don't think so. Like that's your external view that you go out with, and that's what you sell on, right? So when you go and talk to investors or your team or potential clients, it's all about your successes. You don't tend to trip over your latest failures or anything like that. But I think that's sort of how most entrepreneurs end up feeling, or business owners end up feeling. But there's this really interesting study about entrepreneurs and depression and mental health, and how actually a very large percentage of people who are entrepreneurs are depressed. And the question is whether or not it's the cause or the symptom.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean? So, is it because you've decided to put yourself under so much pressure and stress that you've caused yourself to become depressed? Entrepreneurship's great. Or is it the fact that you've always had that, and it's actually driven your desire to create something new, to make a better world for you to live in? And it's because you're constantly striving to try and sort of fix that problem. And I find that really interesting. And as a result, there's this. I've met so many CEOs of companies, ranging from very small startups right the way up to really, really big tech companies that all really struggle with it. They always have. They hide it. Not necessarily. That's not necessarily a good thing, or that's not what the media is telling us all that we should be doing. But a lot of people do hide it. But they do. They do. Sort of eventually sort of go, actually, I'm just not very happy. And it's and actually I think a lot of the time that's what drives them. That's what makes them successful. It's that push away from feeling that way.
It's interesting, I would sort of bear out some of what you're saying, definitely, that there's an element of I can see it myself sometimes, not on a sort of huge level, but the sort of gnawing dissatisfaction that sometimes is there does drive you to kind of want to change things a lot. So constantly throwing things up in the air in the hopes that when they all fall down to the ground, they look a bit better again. So I think there's a bit of that, definitely, and not getting to a point where you go, that's all fine actually. And I think if mentally you're not likely to get to a point where you just accept everything as being fine, then you probably do push a bit more. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but
they do, and I think that's what drives people all the way to the top. They're the ones that end up being generally the owner CEOs of large tech companies, not necessarily the CEO, somebody that's been gone the Harvard route and then ended up as CEO of General Motors or something like that. They're a different breed, and they work inside of a process. But the entrepreneurs, the guys that are at the top of Google, Facebook, Twitter, they've driven themselves there. They've climbed that mountain of their own accord via a completely different route to the one that anybody else might take. It's a common it's a philosophical thing. I think it was Freud that said that humans, like, the human struggle is to move away from discomfort. That is literally all we do. We move away from discomfort to comfort. So If something is uncomfortable, you will move away from it, and you'll just keep pushing away from it. And that's what we do.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at and I agree with that completely, when you look at what we both sort of do for a living now, I suppose there's an element of kind of facilitating people making that move. Because I see a lot of people, again, going back to travel and leisure, because it's what I know best and it's where a lot of my contacts are, who are just in this state of, yes, very unhappy inertia. And it's encouraging people to do something at the moment is a lot of what we're doing. Even if the something, and I have had one or two conversations where the something is stop now, close your business, or if you can hibernate it for 9 months and you can afford to live by doing that, then just do it today. But it's an action. So I think a lot of the task that I find myself doing at the moment is pushing people to just do something. And I don't know, you might have a very different experience in different sectors that I suspect have less immediate pressures.
No, I agree. I think the bigger the organization you're working with, the harder it is to make them to do something, because there's so many decision makers involved, and that becomes really problematic. But smaller businesses are definitely open to doing things. I think the area where, not necessarily sort of about sort of during COVID, it's more been about over the last couple of years, people that have wanted to start their own business that I've met, people that wanted investment, or people that have this desire to build their own company, or perhaps go and join a startup that was funded, which is pretty low risk, a bit more high risk than a normal job, but pretty low risk. And I think they tend to see everything in a very binary, black and white sort of way. And I admit I used to see it exactly the same. You've got to go from, if I want to be an entrepreneur, I need to quit my job, have no income, and then build a company, and then hope it's all okay. No, there's like 500 shades of grey in between, those two things that you've got to sort of look at and try. And a lot of the time it is a case of just taking that step, go and have a conversation with somebody and see what happens. But people don't, they shut down opportunities really early on. I think a very common one is, somebody will have a job in a company and they'll get approached by another company about a job. Would you be interested in, we're looking for somebody like you, heard some good things, would you be interested in coming for a chat? And they instantly go to, oh God, I can't leave. So-and-so is going to be really angry with me. What am I going to do about the childcare? And it's like, no. Go and have a conversation. You might walk out of that initial conversation going, this is not for me at all. Or you might go and have that conversation and go, wow, that's really opened my eyes to some interesting opportunities. And maybe that is something that I really want to do. And then even then, you still don't have to worry about who you're going to piss off, or what the childcare is going to look like, or how much your fuel is going to be when you travel. It's just, wait, you don't have to make a decision until somebody's putting a piece of paper in front of you, you've got to sign. And even at that point, you can walk away. And it's the same for investment, for starting a company, for signing a contract, for getting a new customer. Anyway.
And when I was at the period after I sold the travel business that I was involved in, and then sort of working with the new owner, who was quite a formidable character really, and his philosophy was very much exactly what you're saying there, of everything's a yes until it's a no. So you kind of like, if an opportunity comes up, just keep going with it until you get to the point where you go, actually no, but stay as open-minded as you can until you get to that point. And I'm really thinking about the sort of wider economy and what's going on at the moment. I'm really kind of excited about the potential for all of these businesses that might come out of people who've been on furlough. So they've had a bit of a trickle of income, and this side project that's been bubbling away in their brain, they thought, actually, and not everyone will have had a project, and that's fine, and not everyone will have been in a sort of position to be able to put time into something, which again is fine. But there'll be a chunk of people who've gone, actually, I've got time. I don't need to worry about paying the bills right now. This idea, let me explore it. And there's going to be stuff that appears over the next 18 months that people have just had the ability to spend time on it and start talking to people and pursue it without that risk factor you're talking about. And there's gonna be some cool stuff that appears. I'm absolutely sure of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, it sort of breeds ingenuity, this sort of environment. And I think also the government's doing a lot to really help. I got into quite a few conversations with UK Research and Innovation, or Innovate UK, over the last year, and then I've ended up becoming a consultant to their grant funding process.
Right.
So I review venture capital funds that want to co-invest with them, and they're running a lot of really interesting challenges across different sectors to try and boost you know, sort of entrepreneurialism there. And I think, you know, that previously, you know, sort of if anybody mentions, like, you know, grant funding, have you considered grant funding? It's brilliant. Like, it's something that every business should look at, really, as part of their, you know, what's the mix of their financial support. You know, whether that's, you know, some investment, or, you know, or hopefully revenue, or, you know, or grant funding. It's very viable. You know, the government pumps a lot of money into a lot of different sectors, and the added benefit is that it's non-dilutive, and it's basically free money. You know, as long as you're, you know, you set out in there, you know, what it is that you're trying to achieve and how it aligns to the challenges that the government's setting. You know, you could get, you know, and a lot of the time they'll do matched funding. So that's why they're working with venture capital funds, so that, you know, the venture capital fund will put in $1 million, the government will match it with $1 million. So your company then receives 2 million quid in funding to work on something, but you've only actually sold equity for the 1 million.
Yeah.
The other millions come from the government as
and what sort of strings, I mean, it's an interesting area. What sort of strings are attached to it? Does it have to meet certain criteria for economic growth in a geographical area, or expansion of knowledge in a particular field, or, you know?
Well, that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
So there's if you go on the Innovate UK website at the moment, there's a number of different challenges that they're working across: quantum computing and transforming agri-tech. That's agriculture, not angry. And what else they got? There's maritime. There's a number of different things. They've got a COVID-19 challenge. So I think there was like 20 million available or something for the COVID-19 challenge. And there was you know, sort of like people to innovate, create businesses that were going to help the economy through this sort of lockdown phase. Yeah, there's generally, so what there is, there's guidelines around what they're trying to achieve. So, you know, this is the challenge. You know, we're working in, you know, in quantum computing, and we're looking to, you know, sort of forward the UK's standing in quantum computing in the following areas. Boom, 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 boom. And we're looking for businesses that can, you know, that are looking to accelerate in this space and offering products and want to trade internationally. Because this is the other benefit: the government can do a hell of a lot to help you promote your business overseas. You know, it's with the Department of Trade, and that, you know, they've got access into industry as well. So if you receive a grant from UKRI, then suddenly big pharma companies or manufacturing businesses might be interested in working with you. So yeah, they sort of outline, you know, what's the challenge, the overall area that they're trying to see innovation in, and then it sort of they'll give you guidance around what they want to see. So it's normally for a project rather than just a company. So you wouldn't go in and say, I need £1 million of working capital to get my company off the ground. You would go in and say, you know, this is my company, and we've got a project to design and build a offshore wind farm in Ripley.
for example.
For example, inland, offland, and they would then look at the total cost of that project. So, who are the people involved in it? What's the R&D activities? What's your cost of raw materials and building, and how long it's going to take? And then what are the metrics and measurements that you're going to put in place? And then you agree to a certain amount of oversight. So you would appoint somebody that would be, responsible for managing this program and making sure that it, you stuck to what you said you were going to do. That's basically it.
Okay, that's interesting. I think that's one that I can imagine quite a lot of people ought to be looking at it who aren't in that.
It is getting. I think there's definitely been an uptick in people applying for grants.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, but it's not something that should be overlooked. And I think if you've got a genuine business or project in mind that aligns to any of the challenges that they're putting out there, then you've got a strong chance of doing well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's been really really good sort of chat and pick your brains. When I think I sent you the invite, I said it'd be a ramble chat. I didn't realize we'd go everything encompassing Freud and sort of grant applications, but it's good to be broad. We shouldn't limit ourselves in this.
Definitely.